Here's a condensed yet comprehensive biography of Admiral Sergey Avakyants covering his early life. Education, naval career, leadership of the Pacific Fleet, and recent roles. You'd like certain periods expanded to reach around 6,000 words, just let me know. Here's a more detailed expansion on Admiral Sergey Avakyants' early life and family. Enriched with context and sources, birth and family background of Admiral Sergey Avakyants' place, and date of birth: born April 6, 1957. Some sources list 1958 place of birth, Yerevan. Armenian Soviet Socialist Republic, then part of the USSR. Yerevan, the capital of Armenia, was a significant center of culture, education, and military recruitment. During the Soviet era, though Armenia is landlocked, Yerevan was home to many Soviet officers, engineers, and intellectuals, many of whom were posted across the USSR. Avakyants' birth in this environment placed him at the crossroads of Armenian heritage and Soviet military culture. Father, Iosif Serapionovich Avakyants, rank, Captain, first rank, equivalent to Colonel in Army term service. Soviet Navy ethnicity, Armenian. Iosif Avakyants is a career naval officer in the Soviet fleet. While detailed biographies of him are scarce, he was known within military circles and possibly involved in Black Sea or Northern Fleet operations. Judging by the Soviet Navy's structure and his son's early assignments, Sergey's choice of a naval career was clearly influenced by his father's rank and life in uniform. Iosif Avakyants was reportedly highly respected in the naval command structure and likely instilled in his son the values of discipline, patriotism, and loyalty to service. Mother, Elvira Konstantinovna Avakyants, Kashenko, ethnicity, Russian background, civilian. Not much is publicly known. Her Russian roots introduced Sergey to the dominant language and culture of the broader Soviet military command, which likely helped him function comfortably across ethnic and regional lines. Her influence also likely contributed to the bilingual and bicultural identity that defined his early upbringing. Ethnic and cultural identities: Sergey Avakyants is of mixed Armenian Russian descent, a combination that was not uncommon in the diverse fabric of the Soviet Union. His surname, Avakyants, is distinctly Armenian, derived from the Armenian male name Avak, meaning elder or chief. Despite rising to one of the highest ranks in the Russian Navy, Avakyants has been recognized within Armenia and Armenian diaspora communities as a source of national pride. Reflecting the long history of Armenians serving in Russian and Soviet militaries, family influence on naval aspirations from a young age, Sergey would have grown up immersed in naval talk stories of patrols, submarine drills, international diplomacy, Cold War tensions. It's likely that he frequently moved due to his father's military postings. He had early access to military training facilities, ships, or naval culture. Naval command was not just a profession, but a family tradition and a point of honor. This background formed the psychological and emotional bedrock of his future leadership. Style, reserved, loyal, technically meticulous, and institutionally aligned. Broader context of Avakyants' birth in the late 1950s came shortly after Stalin's death and during the early Khrushchev years, when the Soviet Union was both rebuilding militarily and shifting toward a more global maritime presence. His upbringing coincided with Soviet naval expansion, geopolitical tension with the U.S., and an cultural and ideological Cold War training within this environment that his identity as a future naval leader began to form. Here's a detailed and historically grounded account of Admiral Sergey Avakyants' education and military training, tracing his journey through some of the most prestigious naval institutions in the Soviet and Russian armed forces. Education and military training of Admiral Sergey Iosifovich Avakyants. 1. Nakhimov, Higher Naval School, graduated in 1980. Location: Sevastopol, Crimean Peninsula, then part of the Ukrainian SSR. Full name: Nakhimov, Higher Naval School of the Soviet Navy. Enrollment period: late 1970s, approximately 1975 to 1980. Graduation: 1980. Focus: ship handling, missile systems, naval strategy, gunnery, and marine engineering. The Nakhimov School was a premier officer training institution for the Soviet Navy. It's named after Admiral Pavel Nakhimov, a Crimean war hero. Admission was highly competitive, with priority often given to children of military personnel like Avakyants. Curriculum highlights advanced courses in nautical navigation, Soviet naval doctrine, and anti-submarine warfare study of foreign navies, especially U.S. and NATO fleet's tactical exercises in the Black Sea Fleet while enrolled. Sergey would have trained aboard vessels and developed hands-on skills in seamanship, naval artillery, combat readiness. By the time he graduated in 1980, he was a commissioned officer, ready for deployment in the fleet and entry point into the Soviet Navy's professional corps. Higher special officer classes of the Navy years attended 1989-1991. Purpose: mid-career professional enhancement for line. Officers' focus: fleet-level command operations, strategic planning, and logistics crisis management. Nuclear deterrence policies. Of multi-fleet deployments and joint combat operations, these classes served as a refinement course for experienced officers, typically attended by those preparing for command of ships, squadrons, or major departments. By this time, Avakyants had already served aboard several ships and was gaining seniority in the officer corps. This period coincided with the final years of the Soviet Union. The Navy was under enormous strain, budgetary cuts, rising geopolitical uncertainty, and technological stagnation. Training at this time would have included elements of crisis response and naval reform. Kuznetsov Naval Academy graduated approximately 1,997-1,998 location, St. Petersburg, Leningrad. Rushoffel name: Admiral of the Fleet of the Soviet Union, Kuznetsov Naval Academy status: Russia's premier advanced command naval academy postgraduate level. Admission criteria: only open to experienced officers, typically captains. Senior officers' curriculum includes fleet logistics, maritime strategy, geopolitical planning, oceanographic command, Cantrell C2 systems, integrated operations across submarine, surface, air, and coastal units of Avakyants. Time at the academy would have aligned with a transitional phase in Russian naval doctrine, as it shifted from global Cold War operations to regional defense, nuclear deterrence, and modernization. His studies here would prepare him for fleet command, including broad strategic leadership and multi-theater coordination. Military Academy of the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Russia years attended, circa 2005-2007. Strategically education for generals and admirals location, Moscow reputation, often called the Russian War College, produces national-level commanders and defense planners. Avakyants' enrollment at this academy marked him as a top-tier candidate for full admiralty. The curriculum is classified but believed to include nuclear policy and strategic deterrence, joint force integration, Army, Navy, aerospace, civil-military crisis, coordination, cybersecurity, information warfare, and disinformation, global geopolitics with emphasis on NATO. U.S. and Asia-Pacific theaters. Graduates are expected to assume roles such as fleet commanders, chiefs of naval staff, or strategic commanders. After graduating, Avakyants was quickly promoted to leadership roles within the Pacific Fleet, indicator of the General Staff Academy's direct pipeline into elite military command. Here is a comprehensive, chronological overview of Admiral Sergey Avakyants' naval career progression, highlighting his rise through the ranks from a junior officer in the late Soviet era to a full admiral and one of Russia's most influential naval commanders in the 21st century. Naval career progression of Admiral Sergey Avakyants' early career in the Soviet Navy. 1980s post-graduation from Nakhimov Naval School. 1980, Avakyants began service in the Northern Fleet, one of the most strategically significant naval forces of the USSR, responsible for Arctic operations, nuclear submarines, and counter-NATO activity in the North Atlantic. Roles and experience: started as a watch officer and progressed through department head roles aboard warships, served on anti-submarine vessels and missile-armed cruisers, gained deep operational experience with surface warfare, crew management, and onboard tactical systems, participated in long-range voyages. Naval exercises in the Arctic and Barents Sea. This era shaped his technical proficiency in ship command and his understanding of high-latitude, multi-domain naval operations. Transition to Russian Navy and Special Officer Training 1990s. Following the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991, Avakyants remained in the newly formed Russian Navy, which was struggling with budget cuts, base closures, and reorganization. Career milestones: completed higher special officer classes 1989, 1991. Took up executive officer and captain roles aboard destroyers and cruisers, assigned to combat training units, helping maintain operational readiness during a time of severe decline in fleet activity. Became involved in training younger officers and crew by the mid-1990s. Avakyants had established himself as a reliable, technically skilled officer with a reputation for discipline and professionalism, paving the way for fleet-level appointments, senior officer roles late 1990s to early 2000 WASAF, completing studies at the Kuznetsov Naval Academy. Avakyants transitioned into senior command positions, including ship division leadership. Notable appointments: Commander of Surface Ship Division in the Northern Fleet.